Kim Purvis, and Allison Robinson. Make sure to check us out on our Facebook pages, REP Paranormal and Friends and REP Paranormal Busters, for up-to-date show information and events. Hey everyone, welcome to REP Paranormal and Friends. I know this is a little different. We are on a special night tonight. I had to change the date for a daughter's track meet. So hopefully you all find us tonight on this Wednesday night instead of Thursday night this week. But we do have a special guest for you. We have Anthony Holter of Spectre Paranormal. So welcome. I'm so glad to talk to you. I'm so glad that you found us.
Super excited. I'm glad that that we could connect.
Oh yes, for sure. So I've been kind of creeping up on your Twitter or X page or whatever they call it nowadays. But
Right.
but anyways, you've been investigating for around 17 years. You have your own team, which we just talked about. But not only are you a paranormal investigator, you're also a demonologist, a Reiki master, and then you also do cryptozoologist as well in your arsenal. So, can you kind of give us a little bit of background how or what got you interested in the paranormal?
Sure. I mean, and that's kind of like the golden question.
Mm-hmm.
Probably my favorite question because it's so interesting to hear everybody's stories of how they got into the paranormal. Now, everyone I've come across, it's like something really cool. Like, oh yeah, I've been seeing shadows and ghosts and sensing spirits since I was like a kid,
Mm-hmm.
like all
Right,
that
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
For me, I'm originally from Minnesota. And during the time that I had my first experience, my family was going through a tough time. So I was helping my brother babysit my three nephews.
Mm-hmm.
And on this property that they lived on, it's called the Mayo Woodstone Barn, which is how the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota got its name.
Mm-hmm.
And so the family lived on this property, and they all died on the property.
Oh wow.
You
Okay.
know, okay,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
at this time, I'm thinking 2006 probably, all kind of like the turn of when things were starting to amp up around the ghost shows and, paranormal
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I saw not one, but two shadows when I was on the couch looking like outside of the
Uh-huh.
front window. One looked like a
Wow.
full on shadow apparition,
Mm-hmm.
and turn my head to kind of look back because it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired, I'm probably making it up or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then look back out the window and it was gone. This property is locked. No one can get on the property, and no one of the other family was there that day. So I was like, okay. But then when I had focused my attention back into the house in the living room because I was
Mm-hmm.
sleeping downstairs, a
Mm-hmm.
bigger mass, kind of discombobulated, came right into the house and went right upstairs.
Oh
And
my
it
gosh.
freaked me out.
Oh yeah, I
I'm a
bet.
protective uncle. I'm
Yeah.
going to be caring about those kids.
Right?
you
Yeah,
know? And
exactly.
so, like, I ran up the stairs and woke my brother up and was like, brought him downstairs and checked on the kids, and just like everything was so crazy in that second. And I told him what happened, and he's like, Anthony, he's like, you experienced a paranormal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
It's like, because we didn't grow up really like around this stuff. I mean, now looking back
Mm-hmm.
on things, there was maybe one house that, can be kind of questionable.
Right.
But even then, it was kind of like, mild stuff like water on the floor, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't anything to really worry about. So yeah, I mean, it was just crazy. And from then on, at that point, it really interested me to
Mm-hmm.
remotely think for a second that there is a supernatural dimension,
Mm-hmm.
out there in the world that is not anywhere near the world that we live in right now.
Oh yeah.
So it fascinated me.
I I agree with you on that. And I love hearing everybody else's stories too, because everybody is different when they come into the paranormal, and some got into the paranormal not even having an experience,
Right.
which is also kind of interesting. But
Hmm.
you've been doing this for roughly 17 years plus. Um, do you have a favorite piece of equipment?
So I'm old school.
Uh-huh.
So my favorite piece of equipment, which was actually my first piece of
Piece of
equipment,
equipment. Okay,
is
that was.
just your normal digital voice recorder.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the bread and butter piece of equipment that you can have anywhere for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it just and everyone cares about brands and this and this, that and that. And
Right.
I got one that was like $2 off of like a third party website,
Oh,
and it
nice.
functioned just as fine. I mean, the buttons were a little noisy when you're clicking on record,
Yeah.
but I mean, it was still, and that's where I get like a lot of my evidence is that audio
Mm-hmm.
that comes through.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. We were the same way. Our first piece of Kim and I's first piece of equipment was recorders. We all went out
Hmm.
and bought some really cheap recorders, and then I had a camcorder, with the cassette tape, but it had night vision, and we just rocked with it there at Velisca, and I mean, honestly, those are probably my favorite pieces of equipment too.
Oh yeah, I mean, you don't need a lot. You really
No,
don't.
no.
People
Uh-uh.
think, oh, they got to have like the latest Ghost Stop stuff. Not knocking
Mm-hmm.
Ghost Stop because I
Right.
love going on their website. I just bought uh, IR light off of their website
Oh,
not that
uh-huh.
long
Yeah.
ago either
Yeah.
for my cameras too.
Uh-huh.
But you
Right.
just people try to like rush in and
Mm-hmm.
want all the fancy stuff, and I'm like, number one,
Right.
you have to understand how it works.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, and
Mm-hmm.
just take it easy. It'll be okay. You don't need to have
Right.
have a bunch of expensive equipment.
Right. Yeah, you don't. And another good piece of equipment is yourself.
Oh yeah, that's the best. Your personal experiences
Uh-huh.
to the locations or places you go to.
Mm-hmm.
Only you can really kind of hold that in yourself and be like, wow, kind of, did it change you?
Mm-hmm.
How fascinating was it? Did you try to debunk it? I mean, that's the best.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Now, what is your best piece of data or evidence that you have collected over the years?
So I love this question so
Uh-huh.
much, Allison,
Yeah.
just because like I love reliving the moment.
Yes.
Wish I had the audio.
Uh-huh.
The recorder that I had bought at the time when I was
Mm-hmm.
doing this residential investigation
Mm-hmm.
actually didn't have like a USB port to put in my laptop, so I
Oh,
couldn't rip
yes.
any of my files off. So I
Uh-huh.
would have had to like record it somehow and
Mm-hmm.
put it on there. And so we had done this investigation, and it was really interesting. And this was like my amateur stage, still
Mm-hmm.
trying to get my grounding of what's going on.
Yeah.
And this lady had a lot of interesting stuff in her home.
Oh.
And I particularly a generational uh, porcelain clown jester looking kind of doll.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah. I had some of those
that
back in the day. Probably not as creepy as the one you're probably talking about, though.
I well, and then I was already in the predisposition of the story behind the doll and
Mm-hmm.
how she was sure that it was a haunted object. And after my piece of evidence, I have no doubt. I have no
Yeah,
doubt
yeah.
whatsoever. So I know I try to be really thorough, and I will have like a bag of 10 recorders if I need to cover everything.
Right. Yeah,
Just
yeah.
like whatever. And so I set my recorder down right by the doll on the table,
Mm-hmm.
and I set up a camera because I want to make sure no one's going in there, that we're not going to have any explainable things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And after we were finished, I reviewed all my evidence at home. I was actually playing Xbox
Okay.
and plugged in earbuds to my digital voice recorder,
Mm-hmm.
had those in my ears, and I almost threw my controller through the TV, Allison.
Oh, wow.
What I heard,
Yeah.
this, like, I had to like go back because I was so shocked,
Mm-hmm.
was this, like, I don't even know how to describe it, like cackling, this heavy cackling, like severe
Mm-hmm.
mocking laughter,
Oh,
like it would
yeah.
be like a clown,
Oh my
and I
gosh.
was just like, my mind was blown. Well, later that night when we were still investigating, I had also found out that this doll was sitting on top of a box that contained a book of shadows and a dagger used for ritualistic practices.
Oh, okay.
Now, talk about that for like my probably my second investigation,
Oh,
like
yeah.
going into this,
Oh
and it was
gosh.
like, oh, I was like, well, I'm kind of glad that we'll just that can stay there,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that piece of evidence was just absolutely crazy, and I went back and I was like, okay, this is not any of my team members' voices. I only had 2 team members on my team at the time,
Uh-huh.
you know and, like, she wasn't being noisy or rowdy. Like, I had a camera,
Mm-hmm.
I could make everything match, and it was just like really crazy, just you
Oh,
know
wow. That's insane. Now I have to go back to the recorder thing because um Kim and I also had recorders that you couldn't attach to your
mm,
computer. So everything sat on our recorders for a while until we got a recorder with the USB. So what we did is we had those little black cords that you can run from. We ran it from one recorder to the other, and then we hit record, and we transferred it to that, and then we transferred it to our laptop.
yeah.
It was kind of a process.
Fortunately, right, yeah, that is a process. I mean, kind of a blessing in disguise. That recorder that I had
Yeah.
is now in the bottom of Colossal Caves in Arizona.
Oh,
So
geez. Oh my gosh, that's a good place to leave it.
so yeah, it'd be great to, like, get it and see what kind of evidence,
Oh yeah,
or whatever
right.
weird noises or bats or whatever,
Whatever is on that thing. Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh,
exactly.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, and that was a few years now too.
Yeah. Now you were talking about a residential area. Do you prefer
Mhm.
investigating residential or more of like a commercial location, like a hospital, asylum?
I am 1,000% a team player either way, but
Mm-hmm.
I prefer the commercial
Mm-hmm.
locations, just because when you're dealing with a residential case, as was my last case last year that my fiance and I did in
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota before I moved out here to New Hampshire.
Uh-huh.
You have to be careful, and you have to take a different approach.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be mindful of the things that are going on. Do intake interviews, preliminary investigations, that previous, like, readings, so that you're not getting false readings when you're
Mm-hmm.
doing an investigation. There's so much to really do, and I do the preliminary investigation at a commercial location too,
Mm-hmm.
just to make sure all my ducks are in a row. But there's a certain intimacy there when you're dealing with a resident, or any type of location like that, as opposed to going to, like, say, throw an example out there, like Sweet Spring Sanatorium or something.
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know so
Right.
there's different approaches you gotta take.
Right. And then so with your residentials, Do you go in and you ask them any like personal questions to kind of get a vibe or a feeling for them to see if maybe they were doing some kind of ritual there or open
Oh yeah,
something, or if there's, you
yeah.
know, drug use or something used to make them think that they're having paranormal issues, but they're really not? I mean, there's that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's that's exactly it, and that's why you have to be careful and take an approach. I have waivers that I give to
Hmm.
my clients, and when we do commercial
Hmm.
locations as well, like, hey, I would really like for you to be able to sign and agree to give
Hmm.
me the permission to use the audio and video and whatever we have
Hmm.
to make a video for our YouTube channel,
Hmm.
not necessarily just for entertainment, but for educational reasons too.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, and that was actually the exact case. The last time I had to ask those questions, and
Hmm.
are they on any medications too,
Hmm.
that could have side effects that could, be paranormal presenting, if you will.
Hmm.
So, it's yeah, you gotta cover your whole ground. The whole point to me is to I'm not looking to get famous off of this. I'm
Hmm.
looking to help people. I'm
Yep.
looking to educate people and
Hmm.
be true and authentic when I'm out there in the field.
Right.
Are there always going to be people who aren't going to believe? Of course.
Right. Yep.
I'm sure my next video that I put out there, someone will be like, "Oh, this is just another faker." Whatever, take it with a grain of salt.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I get that. I get that. Now, also with the residential investigations, when you go into these locations, have you found that it's mostly like old wiring, or do you actually get intelligent hauntings?
It's about a half and half on that one.
Hmm.
Quite literally, actually. Most of the time, especially as some of the houses that I have gone into aren't exactly the greatest. It'll be old
Hmm.
wiring. It'll be like copper piping,
Hmm.
or that especially can set off EMF readings or create higher EMF readings that actually makes the person sick
Right.
and makes them hallucinate.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, and that's why the preliminary part of, before you do the actual investigation is important,
Hmm.
to make sure. And sometimes, if I can, if one's available, I'll bring in like psychiatrist or a
Hmm.
psychologist and try to kind of get the lay of the land again with the consent of the
Hmm.
client, because,
Right.
that confidentiality is important.
Right.
But yeah, it's half and half. This last case, honestly, was a complete dud.
Mm.
It
Hmm.
was, a lot of the audio was contaminated because I was totally fine with them leaving like their cats and their dogs there.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna make them go out of trouble or whatever. And they
Right.
were actually pretty well behaved. The cats, with they had jingly collars, so,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
on those digital voice recorders you can pick
Right.
up a pin.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
but I had one EVP come through and then one photo.
Okay.
And it because it's kind of like at that point I was like trying to analyze everything and figure
Hmm.
it out, and it was overnight, so we were there overnight
Hmm.
and just weren't really getting the hits on anything. And I make it a point to also ask, what is the client's belief system?
Hmm.
Like, are they Christian, which is obviously the most prominent
Hmm.
kind of worldly belief out there. I'm Norse pagan,
Hmm.
so I'm not Christian by any means, but
Hmm.
if I'm going to help people, I
Hmm.
have to realize that I'm going to be walking, different paths with
Right.
different clients, and it's going to be focused on what they believe
Right.
in. So using that, because I'm also an ordained pastor,
Hmm.
I was able to help them, kind of settle down and close their case based
Hmm.
on their beliefs at the
Hmm.
end of it.
Right. And now, also with you talking about being an ordained minister, which I wasn't aware of that. That's another thing to add to your arsenal, I guess. But you're
Yeah.
also you're also a demonologist. So how does that help you with your investigations?
So it's actually it's such a interesting topic because seems to be the norm.
Uh-huh.
lately.
Mm-hmm.
So it drives me crazy. But of
Yeah.
course, anything that has the ology in it is the study of.
Mm-hmm.
So I study demonology by the way of demons
Mm-hmm.
based on that Christian ideology, that Christian belief,
Mm-hmm.
as that is where most true demonic cases come.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me want to like wash my mouth out with soap
So
when I say that
yeah, yeah.
because they're so like rare and
Mm-hmm.
just far in between.
Mm-hmm.
But you can never be too prepared for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Chances are literally 9.999% it is going to be a malevolent spirit
Mm-hmm.
that is, maybe not nice in real life and is teed off in the afterlife and they want revenge.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
That's
Yeah.
the theory.
Mm-hmm.
So with the demonology, it takes a lot out of you. I've had one case, just
Mm-hmm.
one, in
Mm-hmm.
my entire time that I've been doing this.
Yeah.
That is actually still hard for me to talk about, so I'm not going to touch too much on that
That's
because
fine.
the people that were with me on that
Mm-hmm.
are still affected by what's
Gotcha.
going on.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
Mm-hmm.
I was an amateur. I've learned from my mistakes. We
Mm-hmm.
grow and we move on.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
But it's a true fear
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
They really feel that anything that happens is demonic.
Right.
And so you have to, again, be careful approaching and be sympathetic,
Mm-hmm.
before don't predispose like, oh yeah, it's totally demonic because you're gonna freak him out even more if you do
Oh
that.
yeah.
Don't
Right.
predispose that idea, but
Right.
you have to be validating and sympathetic. And I've had cases that I've worked on for years.
Mm-hmm.
In general, it's not just one and done kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Your client is with you for life, especially.
Right.
So it's really interesting because I have to separate like my beliefs when I'm studying demonology. Now I have someone who's tutoring me, which
Mm-hmm.
has been really great because there's a lot of resources out there. However, disclaimer: I do not recommend studying demonology.
Mm-hmm.
It is such a chaotic subject. There's so much evolved around it. And you really kind of have to bury your head in the sand like an
Yeah.
ostrich in a way, and just kind of put up with it and
Mm-hmm.
bear with it. But I have taken courses on demonology. I've studied books. I've used the Key of Solomon to memorize some sigils,
Mm-hmm.
certain entities that evolve around that. And I have the book. It is a 1999 Latin and English version of the Rites of Exorcism.
Oh wow. Okay.
And thank God I have not had to ever go that route. I've never
Yeah.
come across anything, like that yet.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I don't, but if
Mm-hmm.
I do, again, I am prepared.
Right.
So it's really about having an open mind. If anything,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to use my faith or belief
Mm-hmm.
uh, if I'm battling a client who believes in demons, and if I'm helping them, the spiritual warfare
Mm-hmm.
that can come about it. So it's a draining ology to study. It is fascinating to learn kind of everything. Again, a lot of it comes from like the scriptures and the
Mm-hmm.
Bible and other books. Not the Church of Satan, but Anton LaVey and his whole Satanism thing that he did. He's got a Satanic Bible,
Mm-hmm.
so it's really pulling resources together and studying everything about it to try to cover and gain knowledge on the topic.
Mm-hmm. How did you even get into this? What fascinates you about it?
That I really so my mom
Mm-hmm.
is my mom was the one. She passed away a couple of years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
Um,
that.
I thank you.
Mm-hmm.
She had told me a story that I can't disclose, otherwise
That's
she'll
fine.
come down and she'll probably light me up with lightning if I do. And it was a horrifying story,
Mhm.
and it, she was one of like those kind of people that had that sixth sense, and
Mhm.
that's how we got into our homes and knew that we were going to be safe and that there wasn't anything kind of funky going on.
Mhm.
And she told me the story, and I really sympathized what she had gone through with this story, and I was like, I I was originally baptized Catholic,
Okay.
and then things along the way, pulled away from the faith due to them being all whatever, and I realized the people that go through these demonic cases
Mhm.
have to do a freaking hula hoop dance and ride on Shamu and SeaWorld and go through like 10 million, different hoops to
Yeah.
get help. And I'm
Right.
like, that's wrong. And that's why I became an ordained minister. And with
Mhm.
my ordination, it's non denominational. So I can
Mhm.
take care of
Mhm.
everybody's beliefs, from pagan to, Buddhism and
Mm.
stuff.
Right.
And so that is another reason why I jumped on the demonology bandwagon and decided to
Mhm.
become a demonologist, is
Mhm.
because I want to be prepared and be there to help people who are going through true supernatural distress,
Mhm.
and they don't have to wait a lifetime.
Right.
Because when it's true, in the rare cases that it is, you don't have much time.
Mhm. Right.
You don't know what's going to happen.
Mhm.
And so, it's just, it's me being armed and prepared to help the people that I can, in those kinds of cases. And
Mhm.
so that story that my mom told me is what made me kind of jump into it and look into it. Now with the help of friends and tutors and all that. So
Mhm. Mhm. Now, with TV and things, the word demon gets thrown out a lot. What are your thoughts on them saying that everything's a demon or negative?
oh man. I
Putting
just
you in the
like
spotlight.
it's not a demon, for
Mhm.
crying out loud. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. And like everybody else, I
Mhm.
watch all these shows. I have my
Mhm.
favorite shows,
Mhm. Right.
that I watch.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, I'm like, why? Why
Mhm.
do you think everything is a demon? It's literally, as I said earlier, like 99.9% of the time, just a malevolent human spirit,
Mhm.
especially if you're in an asylum. Like,
Mhm.
come on, what those poor people went through. Are you kidding me? you
Yeah,
know,
right. Yeah.
like, um, and that kind of falls back to, with that kind of trend going on, it makes it really hard for those of us in the paranormal community
Mhm.
to, remain true and authentic, if you will, because
Right.
everyone's so quick to jump on and be like, you're fake,
Mhm.
this is not a demon,
Mhm.
this is not paranormal,
Mhm.
whatever. And it's just, it drives me bonkers. I'm
Oh,
like,
right.
these people are doing it for the views,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
for money or whatever, and that's not what it should be about.
Right.
I'm all for going to a place and putting up a video. I have
Yeah.
Expedition Paranormal on our YouTube channel that I'm
Mhm.
trying to get set up for,
Mhm.
to go exploring a lot of these places and get some evidence,
Right. Yeah.
but in a true and authentic fashion.
Right. Yeah.
You're not going to
Exactly.
see you're not going to see a video title on my channel say it's a demon.
Yeah.
Because it
Are you
just
gonna have the look too?
like
Are you gonna have the look, like the whole like shock and awe, like I'm terrified, just crap my pants?
it's just like, come on, guys, be be respectful and be true to the community. We don't care if you're in the community and want
Right.
to do this. Everyone's jumping on,
Right.
being an investigator or whatever
Mhm.
these days. That's totally fine.
Right.
But when you're dragging everybody down with your "it's always a demon" kind of
Mhm.
talk, it's frustrating.
Mhm.
And this is coming from me, a demonologist. So
Yeah. You're not the first one. You're not the first demonologist I've heard that from. So You're not alone in that aspect of your thinking. So
Right.
now, if you were to come across a demonic presence, how how do you get rid of something like that?
It takes a lot of energy and a lot of time. It's kind of a mind over matter. Always, I don't care what kind of thing you're dealing with when it comes to this field, always have protection.
Mm-hmm.
That is the first and foremost prominent tip I will ever give anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Have some type of protection. Whether you believe in the power of the crystals, like selenite is a really great one.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you had someone that was a loved one that passed away, and you feel like maybe their ashes is a great protection connection with you.
Mm-hmm.
Have that as a necklace or whatever. Whatever you believe in, prayer. Have
Mm-hmm.
that protection. So I always have to go in grounded and
Mm-hmm.
with protection and with a solid, head. If I have truly ticked off everything, from my client, being evaluated by a psychiatrist or whatever, all those boxes, and we
Mm-hmm.
arrive at the conclusion that this entity is demonic, then it becomes a battle.
Mm-hmm.
It's whether that's, essentially clearing and cleansing and exercising the location, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not always a person.
Right.
It's not always a person that happens to. But if it does happen to a person, you kind of want a bigger support group than just yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because you will get signal out and you will get attacked, and just experience a lot of negative effects from a situation like that. It is not for everybody. You
Right.
really have to be mentally sound,
Mm-hmm.
and at least in decent physical health.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you're
Yeah.
going to try and tackle something like this head on. So it takes a lot of preparation. It doesn't happen overnight. Nothing of this nature and any of these things, happens overnight. People are
Right.
like, "Oh, well, you see an investigation video on YouTube, and it's
Mm-hmm.
an hour." I was like, "Yeah, they condensed probably like 16 hours into an
An
hour,"
hour.
you
Right.
know.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
it doesn't happen overnight, and depending on the type of demonic, because it isn't the Christian ideology is most prominent with demons,
Mm-hmm.
but there are other cultures and beliefs that have their version of demons as well. And so, depending on that case, I will go to the church for help, or I will reach out to colleagues and connections that I have and be like, hey, like, I need your help on
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, I don't want to do it alone. I need the support, because we need to make sure all of our stuff is covered. We need to make sure we're exhausting all of our resources.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another one of those cases, after the clearing and cleansing of the person or place, that you stay in contact with them and you check in on them. And you make sure that they're damn well okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely. You don't
so
just
it is,
go
yeah.
ahead.
So it's
Yeah.
a very, very serious part of the field. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
while we recognize that this field can be fun and
Mm-hmm.
exciting, and it's great if you can gather evidence and such.
Mm-hmm.
There are some very serious, darker parts of it, and it's okay if people don't want to handle that kind of aspect. That's fine.
Right.
That's why you have certain other people
Mm-hmm.
to rely on or to go to. But
Right.
it takes a lot out of you. Again, I've never had to use my exorcism book, so I'm very
Knock
grateful.
on wood.
Yeah, exactly. Knock on wood for sure. So I'm very grateful, but it's better to be prepared than not.
Correct.
And I always make sure too, in that kind of process, that everyone is like cleansed, or that everyone has some type of protection.
Mm-hmm.
That we come up with a game plan. It's like a medieval battle. You have your
Right.
lords at the war table,
Mm-hmm.
setting up a plan. Always have a plan ahead of time. Try to have a backup plan and a backup plan to that backup plan.
Right.
you
Yeah.
so
Exactly. Exactly. Well, with your arsenal, I mean, you're kind of probably the backup plan upon the backup plan upon the backup plan because, I mean, you're an investigator, you're a demonologist, you're an ordained minister, and you're a Reiki master. So, I mean, do you
Yep.
ever? Do you, so, I mean, how did that happen? How did you become a Reiki master?
Just again, so I love knowledge. Knowledge is power. I'm working on something else to add to
Oh,
my arsenal too, by the way.
oh, okay. An
so,
author, right?
so that too. But hopefully here soon, a ufologist.
Oh,
So the
sweet.
focus of yeah, extraterrestrials and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I just find the whole of everything is fascinating. So the more knowledge I can gain is great.
Mm-hmm.
The Reiki Master came after my mom had passed away, and I was kind of lost.
Right.
My mom and I were absolutely best buds,
Mm-hmm.
partners in crime, and I was just like, I felt that I was kind of like caught in a tornado. I couldn't really ground myself.
Mm-hmm.
My ex girlfriend at the time when I was living in California had
Mm-hmm.
gone through Reiki and performed that act on me, and
Mm-hmm.
it genuinely made me feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was a placebo effect or not.
Mm-hmm.
It
Right.
was just, I was like, okay, and so that kind of always sat in my subconscious. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you know what? I was like, I'll look into it. And I had a
Mm-hmm.
friend that was trying to help me too, going through this loss. And they're like, you should really look into Reiki. While you learn about it, it'll
Mm-hmm.
help you kind of get in tune with yourself and the chakras and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I've always been about helping people. All of my jobs have been customer service,
Yep.
pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have that true desire to help people.
Right.
And so, my own grounding exercises help me. And I was like, if I can feel this good by taking in and clearing out my chakras and grounding myself
Mm-hmm.
and, just starting out the day, kind of stopping to smell the flowers,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to offer that to other people and animals too.
Okay.
Animals go through emotions and things like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I actually just finished that fairly recently within the last year. I
Okay.
got my master's certification.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Awesome.
it's good. And, I like to be able to do that. I perform it on myself too. You can
Mm-hmm.
do it on yourself. So
Okay. Very nice. Have you tried it out on like? Have you ever had to use it on an investigation or anything like that?
I usually will leave that up to like if my team members are there, whoever's
Uh-huh.
there. I will leave it up to them. I have done like a couple house calls for maybe someone who's been sick to kind of
Mm-hmm.
like ease them, make them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily physically, but just as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
to feel better. And so yeah, I haven't quite done it on investigation yet. I'm curious now. Now that you say that, I do
Right.
offer it
Mm-hmm.
um, to like my team members because I'll offer to cleanse them too when we're done if they would
Mm-hmm.
like to, just make sure that that energy stays where it is and
Right.
doesn't follow anybody home.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
always good to
Right.
go in with a clear head too, and
Mm-hmm.
so
Have you thought about teaching classes on it yet?
I have, and my brain is so discombobulated because there's so much that I want to offer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I want to do, I'm trying to get set up with like Paranormal 101,
Mm-hmm.
and do, even going through like an equipment class with the equipment that I have and explaining stuff how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, I think I will get there. But it's a slow thing. We're coming out from our off season, so I take a
Mm-hmm.
break with the team where we kind of just settle down and talk about everything and reflect on the previous year
Mm-hmm.
and see how we can better improve ourselves
Okay.
going forward and
Mm-hmm.
kind of brainstorm about ideas. So we have the off season, but now we're coming back into spring, and so I'm punching out a bunch of location emails and like trying to
Uh-huh.
get a bunch of
Yeah.
stuff like ready,
Mm-hmm.
in between everything else, all my other projects that I have going on. So eventually, I think I will offer classes at some point.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Now you did mention your you've Oh my God, I can't even. I'm losing my mind right now. You're gonna talk about UFOs. You're gonna do stuff on that. My brain just like it does like it's on the tip of my tongue. It just won't come out of my mouth. But you know what I mean. But anyways, you also do cryptozoology. So do you
Yep.
have a favorite cryptid or anything like
I
that? Or
do have a favorite cryptid.
uh-huh.
Yep. I probably chose like the worst cryptid out there to be my favorite
Oh
cryptid.
no.
Spoiler alert. It, the whole cryptid thing is the second book that I'm working on.
Okay, very nice. Okay, okay.
So I released the cover art and title for that
Mm-hmm.
on social media. But my favorite cryptid is the Wendigo.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, okay. Yep.
So yeah, I probably literally chose like the worst. I mean, there's a lot of really bad cryptids out there,
Right.
but this one especially because in general the description is not
Mm-hmm.
very. The
It's
description is
not. It
terrifying,
is.
and they're a bad omen to
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of like the bringer of death kind of thing. But
Yeah, a little bit.
um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's funny that you bring that one up because my daughter actually was talking about that not too long ago. She's like, those freak me out. She's into
yeah,
this kind of stuff too.
yeah,
And we were talking about something and she brought that up. And I was just like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. She's like, yeah, those things are creepy. I don't
yeah,
like
yeah.
it. Now, what are your beliefs on cryptids?
It's kind of a healthy skeptic kind of
Uh
thing.
huh. Uh huh.
When it comes to cryptids, it's not like dealing with, ghosts or the supernatural or paranormal
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, as much as a lot of your cryptid stories are just that. It's stories from a lot of Native American cultures, especially,
Mm-hmm.
that get passed down from generation to generation. I've always been told that every story, myth, legend has a minuscule amount of truth to them. But let's be honest, if I'm out taking a walk in the woods in the middle of the night or in my backyard
Mm-hmm.
and I see a very lanky, skeletal, elky, uh, growling cryptid,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to want to go investigate that. I'm going to
Oh,
want to book
come
it
on.
home.
Well, that
So,
would be
I
a little
mean,
creepy.
yeah, yeah, just a little bit. And it's funny that I say that because I was working on an expedition to go to an area of Minnesota before I
Uh-huh.
moved out here that had Wendigo sightings.
Oh my
Never got
gosh.
there, unfortunately,
Oh
but
my gosh. That would be terrifying. It'd be
yeah.
cool, but terrifying at the same time. Like
Oh, yeah.
you'd be
I
intrigued,
mean,
but you want to run.
oh yeah, exactly. I can't exactly do a what is it like the footprint cast on
Oh.
a
Mm-hmm.
spirit or a
Right.
ghost,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge difference. You're using more true like scientific
Mm-hmm.
methods when
Right.
you're dealing with cryptids or hunting
Mm-hmm.
cryptids or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So
Have you ever encountered a cryptid? Any type?
I haven't. Actually, that is the one thing that is lacking a little bit that I haven't experienced. I've been to a million places
Mm-hmm.
that have the potential for cryptids,
Mm-hmm.
especially Black Star Canyon in
Mm-hmm.
California.
Mm-hmm.
I lived there for 2 years and I was on a team there.
Okay.
And that place is chock full of everything from paranormal cryptids, UFO sightings.
Uh-huh.
So, but never, never saw a cryptid. I think the closest thing that I saw was walking on that trail, and it was a white reflector that from a distance made it look like a huge creature.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Oh man. Darn. Now, what are okay, so one of the big things is, Bigfoot, Sasquatch. People are all about that. Trying to
yeah.
figure out, what this really is. There's a lot of speculation that they could be interdimensional. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, I swear every state has like the Bigfoot Sasquatch.
Uh-huh.
It never fails. You know,
Right.
any state that has a remote amount of woods,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
come across that legend.
Mm-hmm.
But in my studying of cryptids and doing what I do and getting knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them come off to be as something that is interdimensional. Now, I've heard things too where it is someone in a costume in a getup.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a camouflage thing, because people try to get these photos, they're
Right.
really blurry. It just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't come out. There's no real solid evidence.
Right.
Um, but that's the fun part because while it may not be a true cryptid from another dimension,
Mm-hmm.
or if it may not be a human,
Mm-hmm.
it's plausible.
Right.
And that is the best term that you can use in this
Mm-hmm.
field is plausible.
Right. Right.
Because
Mm-hmm.
not everything is going to be, paranormal. Things will be explainable. Just because you can't debunk it doesn't mean someone else can't.
Right.
And so therefore it's plausible.
Mm-hmm.
So, I hope that in my further passion that I will be able to encounter a cryptid or encounter Sasquatch or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's like a lot of Bigfoot conferences and stuff,
Oh yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like cool to go to,
Oh
and
wow.
see what other people have experienced.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, for the moment, my official label is plausible. It could be either or. It could be an extinct animal that came back. We don't know. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Or something that they thought was extinct, or a whole new breed, or something that they didn't even know existed.
right?
They're always finding
Exactly.
different animals and things that they had no idea ever existed. So you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now you touch space. You're gonna also be doing um, studies on UFOs and things like that. What got you interested in that? Just
So
have you had experience with that at
I
all?
not exactly. I maybe had one experience, and even then, I
Mm-hmm.
ended up debunking it as being like shooting star or
Uh-huh.
whatever in the sky. But and it's funny because I'm not a huge like sci-fi person
Uh-huh.
unless it's Star Wars because
Yeah.
I love Star Wars.
Yeah.
um, but I was on another podcast with a
Mm-hmm.
gentleman from the MUFON network, which
Mm-hmm.
is
Right.
mutual something. They're
Yes. Yep.
specifically geared toward
We had a gentleman on that was part of
UFOs.
that
Mhm.
project too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
And
know what you're talking
so
about.
again, it was captivating to hear his story and like what he goes through and his studies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm gonna dig up my own information. I'm gonna find out more about it. And so again, it's another one of those. There's a bunch of like classes out there. There's a bunch of like networking you can do, and kind of dig up it. That's becoming a more prominent trend too. A lot of people are seeing more UFO sightings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just
Right.
another subcategory to tackle when working in this field.
Yeah, and that's one thing that it's like there's more sightings, but then there's a part of me like, but there is a shit ton of satellites now up there in the sky. So
Oh
it's like,
yeah, exactly.
you really gotta try to debunk everything you're seeing because you just don't know anymore, honestly, with all the
Oh yeah,
technology they
and
have
drone
floating up there.
shows too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, because you could
Yeah,
do a
the
lot with
drone
those.
shows are huge. Yeah,
Hmm.
and that's a whole other like. I think it's damn near impossible to pretty much investigate space. When
Yeah.
it comes to the ufology in a way.
Hmm.
It's like, what are you gonna do? Be there on the world's largest telescope, staring up at the night sky,
Right. Yeah.
hoping something happens. I mean, there's so
Hmm.
many mysteries in space as is that we
Right.
can't even figure out. Let
Yeah.
alone extraterrestrials.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. But it's always fun to try to do it. That's something that I have been interested in doing too. I've been
Mhm,
big
absolutely.
into extraterrestrials since I was young, so something I haven't done yet. I don't know if I have the patience to sit up there and watch that long.
Right.
I'm kind of a high energy person, but it's still something fun and on my bucket list to try to do anyways to see if I ever see anything. But
Right.
um, before we start wrapping things up, though, you did mention that you have another book, a second book that you're in the works with, but you have one that's coming out next month, correct? Tips from the Other Side. Is
Yes,
that
I do.
okay? All right. Can
Yep.
you give us a little bit of a description of that, or what we can look forward to with that book?
So Tips from the Other Side is my first book that I'm super proud of, and it is literally an easy to follow guidebook for the beginner investigator. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if people want to read something to get an idea of what they're going to expect or experience, you know, it's sometimes a better way to do that as opposed to kind of running head in, you know, with the wolves. You know, ghost tours are fine to go on too for beginners, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's just really a beginner guide. I cover everything. I even have a chapter on safety because safety is important,
Mm-hmm.
and especially like urban exploration or abandoned locations, always get permission.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, yes.
But you know, it's a guide for the beginner investigator. You know, I pretty much do the groundwork for everybody, so people don't have to and explain everything from Paranormal 101. I touch a little bit about demonology, but I
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of disclaimers and do not recommends,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
in that book. So.
Very good, very good. Now, where can they purchase this book?
So it's already available for pre-order with the ebook on Amazon.com, and it will also come out in paperback on Amazon.com as well.
Okay.
Again, that's available on April 1st.
April 1st. All right, perfect. Now, if somebody has questions or wants to get a hold of you or needs help um, with maybe their residence, how can they contact you?
So I have every social media platform imaginable. You know, Twitter, now X. As you found me on there, we
Yeah.
can,
Uh-huh.
you know, that's a good one. People can contact me. We have a Facebook
Okay.
as well. We have TikTok,
All right.
and we have Instagram. We have YouTube as well. You know, comments. I always look at comments
Okay.
on videos and stuff. So just anyway, or they can simply email me too.
Okay.
And that's spectreparanormal1 at gmail.com.
Okay. Adding it to my notes here. So that way we'll add this stuff to our social media as well. So that way people can find it on our social media if they want to get a hold of you.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. And you said that was at gmail.com, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, before we wrap things up, I'd like to just say thank you to everybody who's in chat. Thank you to everybody who was not in chat but listening. Joining us on a special night, kind of threw everybody for a loop being on a Wednesday instead of a Thursday. Next week will be the same thing. We're going to have Corey and Tia Woolman from Woolman Chronicles slash Paranormal on to talk about their adventures. So stay tuned for that. And thank you Anthony, for being on. It was a pleasure talking about you. You have a lot of knowledge and info, and there's so much more that we probably could have actually talked about because you've got a lot of arsenal there to talk about, which is
It's a never
which is
ending
awesome.
field of knowledge. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you, Allison. I really appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then make sure everybody that you check out Anthony's new book, Tips from the Other Side. It's available for pre-order on Amazon.com. And paperback will be available April 1st. So check it out. And like always, peace out, everybody. Until next time.